Hi my friend, in this video we're going to be making a groovy tech house song inspired by Fisher's song, Waiting for Tonight. And we're going to find out if we can do this in under 6 hours by using the 80-20 rule of tech house music production. What you're listening to right now is the song that we'll be working on. And what you're looking at right now is the Ableton project file that we'll be working on. In particular, we're going to go in order of how I actually built everything out. So we'll start off with the drums, going through each layer one by one as I built it out. Then going into the bass, each layer one by one, followed by all the melodic elements like the synths, vocals, the pianos, all that good stuff. That way you can apply everything that you're learning to your own songs. What we'll also be doing at the end of the video is doing a full recap of that 80-20 rule so that you can really hone in on the core 3 or 4 things that you're going to want to follow when building out a track like this. Especially if you want to finish it super fast, because all in all, we pull out here, fully arranged, mixed, mastered, ready to go. It only took about 6, maybe 6.5 hours for me to complete. So also, if you want help finishing songs faster just like this, I've also made you a completely free bundle of templates, samples, and special bonuses that I use to completely finish one song like this every single week. Just visit the link that's on screen now or in the description to grab the Ultimate Song Finishing Toolkit for free. And if you want to take things to the next level, you can also find a link to this video's project files in the description as well. But with that said, let's jump into this. Alright. So when it comes to the drums for this one, as usual, first thing is make sure you have a reference track in your project file here. So we have Fisher and Jennifer Lopez's tune, Waiting for Tonight, up in here. It's turned off and I've set it up so when I press the S key, you can flick back and forth between what we're working on and the actual tune. So we can select the right samples, make sure the notes are hitting correctly, and set the right volumes. That's kind of be the trick there. So what I did for this one is the kind of standard kick trick that I've been doing for the last little while. So the nice thing is when you get a tune that has the extended mix, what you want to do is find an area in the tune where like just the drums are playing. So over back in here, we have the drum outro right here. And so what I did is I have a couple slices here. So I found this little slice right here. And then what I did was I consolidated it with Command J or Control J. So just one sample. And then once you do something like this, what you can do is right click it and then press show in browser. And it'll show the clip there. And when you press this little show similar sound button, it's going to show you all the kick sounds that are similar to this original kick sound. So you can then have something similar that sounds something similar to the original tune, but it's one of your own samples. It's a high quality sample. So it's a nice way to kind of steal the kick from a track without having to actually like steal it from the kick and have like maybe the hi-hats coming through it and all that kind of stuff. So with doing this trick, I ended up with 2 kick sounds that I liked, both from Rocket Powered Sound. So I have one that is kind of doing more of the high end. If you have a listen here. Very subtle. And another that's doing like, it's the main kick really. So just added 2 because I felt like adding 2. I felt like it worked. A good thing to do is when you're building out your drums, build them out actually over like say over here. So if we bring the loop over here, now we can flick back and forth and try to get ours to sound similar in sound and volume to the track that's in the reference. So I feel like ours could sound a little thicker. So something that I might do here is I have this drum bus and I can increase the boom amount. Something like that. So other than that, let's have a quick look at the pattern. So it's just the 4 on the floor. I have it on 2 because I have 2 samples playing. Other than that, what we're doing is I've removed a bunch of the highs on that higher end kind of clicky bit of the kick at around whatever this would be, 900 hertz or so. And then this other one is just playing fully. Other than that, we're running into the standard kind of like little channel strip that I run into. So we have a transient designer here. We're pulling back the sustain a bit to tighten up the kick a little bit. And what this is the free kilohertz transient shaper. I've just mapped the core like knobs to an Ableton rack just to make it simpler and easier to use. And then I've been really loving using drum bus in the last little bit, particularly because you can add in this boom function. And then you can set it to the key of the song if you'd like. Or like have it playing a note that's in the scale, which is also a good idea. Sometimes it's not the best if it's playing the exact same note as say the bass is playing. There could be like kind of frequency overlap, that kind of stuff that makes it sound like crap. But like, for example, off and on, off and on. Adds a lot of like fullness and body. There's probably a little volume there. So again, when you're going through the internet looking at like YouTube tutorials, if someone shows you something and like, it's like, oh, look at this cool new plugin, and the volume is louder when they turn it on, volume loudness is going to be that thing that's going to actually be making you think that it sounds better. So be careful with that. Other than that, that's a good look at the kick. And the main thing is to flick back and forth, trying to get the volumes correct. With that similar sound search feature that we showed here, it's pretty easy to get a similar sound. And then it's all about the volume. Flicking back and forth in context, almost in time. So you can almost hear your kick as if it was in like part of that tune. The next element that I added was this open hat. So let's have a look and listen to that. And let's have a listen to the reference. This has an open hat. So let's actually listen to this. Flick it back and forth. I feel like I actually like picked almost the same sound, which is kind of cool. It sounds so similar. And one of the ways that I was able to do that was similar to the kick trick. I went in over here and found an isolated part of where the open hi-hat's playing by itself. Consolidated it, did the show in browser trick, then clicked the show similar sounds, and then went through these and ended up finding something that sounded similar. So let's have a look at what I ended up with right over here. Let's bring that open hat loud back here. So what I ended up with is a layer of 3 samples. So one is this sound here, which is a big part of it. It's kind of the main element of it. Then we have this sound here, which is very slight addition to it. And then this, I actually brought in the actual sample into my DAW here. So this is from the actual song. And I just have this little bracket that I made here where I'm able to quickly adjust like the filter frequency, adjust the filter to envelope frequency, which helps it kind of like isolate the sound a little bit more, particularly when you're extracting the kick, which is kind of nice. But everything's just all in one area here. Quickly adjust some knobs and kind of isolate the sound altogether. It sounds like this. Main core sounds this. Tightened up the end of the loop so that it's getting more of like a tighter sound. If you listen to the reference, it's fairly tight sound. And I believe I did that for almost all of them. This one I just adjusted the, what is it, the release or the decay, and then on this one nothing too much going on there. But this was a layer of 3 different sounds. Also on this, there's this part here. Let's have a look. Where I've just removed that like louder, more full open hat sound, and this is more of an arrangement trick. There's parts of the song where the open hi-hat isn't as loud and proud playing through, basically, and that's what this part's here for. Other than that, running into the standard channel strip that I run into, which is usually EQ, transient shaping, sidechain, and saturation. So have a look. So first thing is removing a bunch of the lows here. Kind of standard thing that I usually do on almost every single track other than like the kick and the bass, so that it makes room for the kick and the bass. So removing everything under 300 hertz, ducking a little bit at 800. I guess I thought it sounded like shit or something like that, so remove something there. I don't usually do surgical EQ, to be honest. It's more about just finding the right sample and moving on. Then we're running into that transient shaper again, tightening up the sustain once again to get that tighter, nicer sound. With drums, I feel like controlling the sustain is a pretty important, awesome thing to be focusing on. Then we're running into this saturation. So this is just Ableton Saturator. That wasn't what I wanted to click. It's just Ableton Saturator here. Again, just with the main knob not mapped here so that I'm not getting, confused by the user interface and admiring it and then not actually making any moves. This way, you just quickly make your move and move on while you're making your track. And adding a little bit of width with this one knob wider plugin from Polyverse, which is pretty freaking sweet. And just again, it's a free plugin, just mapped all the knobs to an Ableton rack to make things quick and easy and ready to go. Other than that, the next thing that I moved on to was the closed hi-hat. So let's have a look and listen to that. Let's have a look at the MIDI as well. And for this, flicking back, you can hear it, they're like kind of shuffling. It's a cool little groove that's added there with, I believe it's like a shaker and a hat. So I tried to emulate it with both. feel like I didn't nail this part as well as I'd like to, but it's close. So basically, this was just flicking back and forth between the reference track and this to trying to figure out the right pattern. And once I had it, it ended up like this. And then moving on, the sound design, I have already had a rack with like all these different hats in here that I like, and I've set it up so there's this little selector so I can switch through them as I'm flicking back and forth between the reference and what I have going. So I can use the selector to quickly switch through, find the right sound, and then move on. And then other than that kind of standard channel strip stuff, I got rid of a ton of the lows. There's already quite a bit taken away because it kind of sounds like a very crisp and high-endy kind of hi-hat. Then we remove some of the sustain to tighten up that sound a little bit of saturation again, which saturation usually using it to fill out the sound a little bit, add a little bit of like those harmonics, and that can also kind of make it sound full and a little kind of gritty and cool. Next up is this shaker. Let's have a look and listen to this. Let's solo it too because it looks complicated. So it's doing a similar pattern to this hi-hat, so let's add these together. And basically just what I did is I think it's for all these are mostly from larger shaker loops. So I found like shaker loops that sounded sick, but I wanted to just kind of try to get that cool little groove that's going on. So I really just wanted like one of the shaker hits so that I can like play it in. And it's kind of doing that similar like little skippy little bit kind of following along with the hi-hat. A couple different layers there going on. And that's kind of a look at that in context. And then listen to the reference. And then moving on, having a look at any processing here, just removing some of the lows, really not doing too much. It's already quite gone in a lot of these shakers. So that's kind of all good to go. The next thing I added in was a shaker loop to kind of fill it out a bit more. Which you can kind of hear in there. A bit more sparse. This is adding a bit maybe too much energy, but I thought it sounded cool. And this was also a good opportunity to start changing up a little bit so it's not like a super duper carbon copy. In terms of any processing here, we're just removing a bit of the lows, but that's not really doing much. You can see the sample or the loop here doesn't really have much going on there anyways. A little bit of sidechain, one knob sidechain. The way I do it is I have this Ableton shaper device with this like nice little curve. It's set to quarter notes, which is what the kick is doing, and it's just ducking a gain on an Ableton utility. That way it's doing a similar effect to sidechain, but you don't have to open up a compressor and route it to the kick each and every time. It's just one knob, you can dial it in and move on. Other than that, a little bit of Ableton saturation to fill up the sound a little bit, and I ran it into a K clip. I think it was going above 0, so I wanted to toss something a clipper on top to make sure it's not going above 0 and having kind of digital clipping distortion, which can sometimes sound bad. In this case, I just wanted to control it a bit. So this was just for more, I guess, perspective. This over here was going above the 0 amount here, so I was trying to just control that with a clipper. And let's have a look at, I think there's still quite a few cool things going on. So then I felt like, I guess when I was listening to this, the hats were interesting and really driving the tune. So I decided to go with those first when building this one out. And then I got into like the claps. So let's have a look and listen to the clap. So what we got going on here is in terms of the pattern, it's on the standard like 2 and 4, like most claps and snares. Again, similar thing, I was flicking back and forth between the song. And just trying to find a bunch of different clap sounds that were similar. With claps, a good thing to usually do is have 2 different sounding claps, and you pan one a little bit to the left or a lot bit to the left, and one a bit to the right or a lot bit to the right. It creates a nice cool like stereo sound, and it sounds like sick and awesome basically. Just look at that, and then in any processing here, just moving some of the lows, shelving out, and low passing a bit of the high to kind of nestle it in a little bit, and just a little bit of saturation to fill out the sound. Main thing here again is really the volumes. That's why there's not that much processing. If you find good sounds and you're playing in the correct notes and stuff like that, or really just find the right sounds and set the right levels, then you're pretty much 80% of the way there, which is kind of nice. So next up, I like to usually fill out these out with a snare, so I added this in. Probably very hard to tell, so I'll turn up the volume. And that's, I don't know if it's really in the tune. Sounds like it's mostly claps, to be honest. But I usually like to have something like claps left and right, and then a snare down the middle. It's going on the same pattern. It's kind of like two on the 2 and 4 of each bar there. And then basically just went through a bunch of different snare sounds that I had and landed on this. And then, like, I don't think there's actually, okay, there's some processing. Removing a little bit of low, so it's making room for the kick and the bass. And that's really, really it. Next up is an interesting, fun part, which is the Congo bit. So, or Congo or bongos or whatever you want to say. So let me turn it on and let's have a listen to it. And let's listen to the reference. Basically what I did is I just looked up kind of like Congo bongo kind of tribal stuff on Splice. Found something that sounded kind of similar, and then I just chopped it up a bit and moved it into areas that were similar to the reference track to get like a similar vibe. And then some processing, removing some of the lows, shelving out some of the highs, but also low passing some of the highs just to try to like nestle it in. It was just quite like a tonal. Sounds sick, full too, to be honest, but trying to like just nestle it into the rest of the drums a little bit, in the exact same way that we're bringing up the attack, so the transients are hitting a little bit harder. The main thing is that we're using the transient shaper here to duck some of the sustain, so that it's a nice way to help it blend into the track and sound like a little bit more minimal and awesome. I'm running into a sound choice effect track, using the pan man to just do this little bit of movement, so the congos are moving a little bit, which I like to do. Something that I did add in was the shifter device from Ableton. And I dropped it by 12 semitones or an octave and just blended in the dry and wet a little bit. Subtle. Adds a little bit of like thickness and body to it, I would say. But that main thing is like the volumes. Really, that's really the main thing again. Then what I like to add on usually is some kind of like a break. So I added on this loop here. Turn it up. And solo it. So usually something I like to do is build up the core sounds like this: kick, open hats, claps, snare, the core sounds using your one shots, and then layer in some kind of break or top loop, which is a nice way to add some character and complexity in a subtle way, because usually these breaks have like more like fills and little bits of character into them, and it's a nice way to blend it into the rest of your core sounds to make it sound like fuller and cooler and more, you know, dynamic and interesting. So just found this house break on Splice. I did the little trick where you set the transients here and you change it to the right arrow and you can dial back the transients, which is another way to tighten up the sound to help it blend in with those core sounds. Other than that, removing a bunch of the lows, trying to get rid of like the kick and any of that low end information, so that our low end information is what's really important there. Like our kick is nice and loud, taking up all that low end, same with our bass. And then Transit Designer, tightening it up even more so with the sustain, a little bit of sidechain for like pumping, making room for the kick, a little bit of saturation, fill up sound a little bit, and a little bit of width here again to make things a little bit more stereo, push things left and right. And then what do we have? A couple last little bits that I added in was like in the reference. I feel like I could hear like more little bits in the high end. So I added this little vinyl bit. Solo it for a second. I looked up like vinyl hi-hat and then just used the same pattern as before. So that way it's just adding a little bit of like kind of crispiness in the high end, which I thought sounded kind of cool. Removed a whole bunch of the lows to make sure that it's just that high end. Removed the attack a little bit, so that way it's the other hi-hat is taking care of the main transient, and this is a little softer. A little bit of saturation to fill out the sound. And what I think I did add in some of these over here was I added like these rides, super subtle, so I'll solo it. Same thing, kind of following that little ta-ta-ta-ta little bit of like that we originally brought in with that hi-hat. So it's another way to add in a little tiny bit of high end. Not sure how effective this stuff really is, but I added another one here. Let's have a listen. Just a ride sound. It sounded like there was like some kind of little high-end sprinkling going on in the main track, so I wanted to try to emulate that basically. But yeah, so that's a look at the drums for this one. All right. So when it comes to the bass for this one, First thing, like normal, is make sure you have the reference track in your project file. So we have Jennifer Lopez and Fisher's tune Waiting for Tonight up in here, and I've turned it off and I have it set up so when I press the S key, it solos it. So you can flick back and forth to get, make sure we're doing everything correctly, basically. So let's jump into this. So there's 2 layers on this bass track, but we're going to start off with just one. So what I wanted to show you is this. The main sound of this is definitely a sub with like a little bit of kind of like a bouncy top. But let's jump into first the MIDI notes. So there's two sets of notes that we're going to look over. First, this is kind of like the verse and the main beat. It's like these 2 more held notes and then like a little bounce. Mostly just like bouncing between this really. What I did was got this first bit here done correctly, and I'm not gonna lie, the way that I did it was just flicking back and forth, listening, and trying to get things right. And then I set the Ableton key to the right key, just like on Beatport I saw that this is what it was saying was the key, so it made it so it was limiting the amount of notes that I had to figure out. Just followed along here with the purple here, made it a little easier to figure out. Then once I had that done, I just made these small little kind of like adjustments. Some notes play a little bit longer, some a little shorter, just some way to like make it so this very 1-bar loop has some changes happening over time. Makes it more human, makes it a little bit more interesting to listen to. Then in terms of the sound, what we're running into is a pretty basic sub sound. This is a little rack that I made called the V sub, and it's just using an operator. For the most part, it's just a sine wave. So super duper simple, full sounding and awesome. This rack just allows us to dial in a little bit of extra saturation. It has sidechain built right into it, so just have a 1-knob sidechain, boom, and we're done. Usually I add a bit more drive, but this is a very clean sounding sub to me. If you listen, very simple, very clean, very nice and full. Then what we're doing next is, then once I usually have 2 layers like this. One reason I like this is, one, you can have it so your sub layer is just taking care of all the low end and you're really just focusing on that. So that way, when you add in like the mid bass bit layers that add more character and like a bit of vibe, you can play around with the mid bass in ways that you're unrestricted, because you don't have to worry about like, oh, what if I add this weird distortion to it and it destroys the low end. You don't have to make those choices and worry about that, because your sub is just taking care of the low end, it's doing its thing, and you can go do sound design to your heart's content on like the mid bass layer. In addition to that, I always find that when you're picking your notes and figuring all that out, like all this, a sub is very similar to like almost working with a guitar or piano. Very clean, like sound, not a lot of sound design stuff that can like mess with you. So you can really just focus on getting the right notes. So I really like that. It's really similar to like figuring out something on an acoustic guitar or something first, something like that. Next thing that I added is this mid bass. So let's have a look and listen to that. And I'd like to solo it for you too. So what I was hearing, like boom kind of sound to me like a 808. So I went for an 808 sound. First, as usual, let's start off with the notes. So as you can see here, there are no MIDI notes in this MIDI track, and so this is the trick that I like to do. Over here up at the top, normally it's set to all ins. When it's set to all ins, it's going to be looking at the MIDI notes in the track to decide what notes to play and then play them through the VST or the sound or whatever. If you instead select something like subs, like what I did here, it's going to route the MIDI notes from this track into this one. And why I find that useful is this way, as you're working through the tune, if you make changes to the MIDI notes here, you don't have to like do like a crazy copy and paste job and move them over to the other track. It's all in one piece, it's all working together. You have one track doing the notes and the other one is just following it. So you can make changes throughout the song. I really like that flexibility. Just need to make sure you flick it to subs and you set it to in, because if you set it to off, it's not going to work. So you want to just set it to in so that it's actually going to play it live. In terms of the sound here, what we got going on, and actually one real quick thing, when you do this trick, it's a good thing to have an Ableton like pitch device in here so that you can like quickly make that sound jump up an octave or 2 octaves or down an octave. In the case that say the sub sounds really good at a particular octave and that octave doesn't sound right with the mid bass layer, maybe it's too low or too high. This way you don't have to like go back in and duplicate the MIDI and shift it up or down, you can just do that right here. In this case, they worked together nicely, and so away we went. In terms of the sound, using a Vital, which is a free plugin. It's similar to Serum, but basically it's free, so I definitely would check it out. And what I'm using here is there's an absolutely amazing YouTuber and artist named Be The Lick, and he had a video where it was going over bass sounds, or maybe it was like UKG bass sounds, I'm not sure, but basically just gave away a bunch of cool presets, so I found one that he was using here. And one cool thing is he also adds these little macros, so you can kind of like adjust right here to adjust the sound a little bit. So basically I just threw it in. It already sounded amazing because he's freaking awesome, and then just adjusted the macros here to kind of fit it in, because it's kind of more subtle if you listen to the reference. It's pretty subtle, nothing too crazy going on here. Just a little bit of that like gliding 808y kind of sound is what I was going for. So that's a look at that. Definitely check out his channel as well. And then kind of standard channel strip. So this is the channel strip I have on every single one of my tracks. That way I'm able to quickly mix as I go, mostly just using my ears because it's all like one knob effects and stuff like that. First off is EQ. One of the biggest things is when doing the two layer trick with the bass, you're going to want to remove a bunch of the lows on your mid bass, so that way you're making room for the sub to shine through and you're not having too much overlapping frequencies and maybe phase, or just like too much overlapping makes mud in those areas. So you want to remove it so that the sub can shine through. And then what I used was a low pass filter to dial out some of the highs, kind of blend it in and make it so it's not like jumping out too much. If we turn this on, sounds louder. It sounds sick, to be honest. I still like it like that, but this is a way to just kind of blend it in, because the original tune, super subtle, right? So this could be maybe something, if I want to like turn this into my own tune, remove that, but the idea is to kind of blend it in, remove some of the highs like that. Then we're running into a transient shaper. So what this is the free kilohertz transient shaper, and this allows you to shape the transient, so like the initial hit of any note. And so what we're doing here is we're bringing down the sustain, and that's making it so like the decay almost of the sound is being shortened. And yeah, you can definitely do that in like synthesis, but I'm not really good with that, and I'm not really interested in sound design. I like more like sampling and shaping stuff after the fact, so that's my preference. I'm sure there's a million and one ways you can do anything, but this is the way that I like to do it. Then what I'm running into is this width plugin, and so what this is another free plugin from Polyverse called Wider. And that's a really awesome free plugin for making things stereo. And I just mapped again the key like knobs to this Ableton rack so that you don't have to open up the plugin. You don't have to like be distracted by the user interface. Just this stuff is always ready to go. It's the default on all my tracks, and I can just quickly bring in some width, adjust it by ear, and then move on. So this is making the mid bass a little bit wider, pushing it to the left and right a bit, making it a bit more stereo, which is allowing the bass to sound like kind of fuller and awesomer. Then what we're running into is the one knob sidechain. So this is the same one knob sidechain that's built into that sub device here. And what this is, I'll show you what this is it's an Ableton shaper device doing this like little shape, and it's running to quarter notes, and it's just ducking at this rate the gain. And since the kick is usually quarter notes, this way you don't have to like set up a compressor and route this to the kick and then like adjust the ratio and the threshold and all this stuff just to get like kind of that pumping sound. It's a nice way you can have it in with one knob, dial it into taste, use your ear, move on, and yeah, that's kind of what I really like to do with this kind of stuff. And then we're running it into an Ableton saturation device. This is just Ableton Saturator. Again, just mapped it to like a rack here. That way you're not looking at it, just dial it in. And this is adding in some extra harmonics, making it a bit more, adding some fullness to the sound and a little bit of grit and texture. That's going to look at that. Other than that, main thing is for each of these things, trying to get the volumes right after you've got the sound right and after you've got the notes right. And then I grouped it all together, and then I'm running it into a K clip. I think there's probably not much going on here. This is just a nice way to make sure it's not going above 0 or anything like that. And yeah, normally I might do some kind of group processing, but in this instance, I think it sounds simple and good, and I'm pretty happy with how it sounds. But yeah, all right. So when it comes to the synths and the vocals for this one, really one of the first things was the vocals that I added in. And I actually added these vocals in around the same time that I was working on the bass line. What I've been finding lately is, especially if you're going to be kind of creating a remix or something that has a very, very important hook, it's really smart to build out your bass line with that in mind. So that way you're not creating a cool bass line, then trying to like fix the vocal to get incorporated correctly. It's a lot easier to adjust like the MIDI notes of a bass line. It's a lot harder to adjust like how a vocal is being sung or anything like that. So I think that's super important. And that's why we're going to start off with the vocal. In this one, what I went for was like similar vibe. It's like this like early 2000s R&B-ish pop music is very in terms of like the remixes right now. So you can see it in like the Waiting for Tonight J-Lo flip there. So I went for something similar and end up with the Britney Spears I'm a Slave for You. So I'm going to play this for a little bit and that way you can have a listen to how it sounds incorporated. So that's how it sounds. I'm going to turn it off as I speak through it. Double vocals can sound a little bit confusing and hard to understand. But basically what I did is I just threw it. I found an acapella just on like YouTube. If you just type in a song and type in acapella, you can usually find like somebody used like an AI thing or whatever to get it out there. And you might be able to just like grab it off of YouTube. So that's what I did in this instance, a lot quicker. And then what I did is I found out the BPM of the track and then changed this track to that BPM temporarily. Then turned on the warp and adjusted it to Complex Pro, played with the formants and the envelope a little bit to make it sound a little bit more natural. And then once the timing was set in correctly, kind of moved on. Other than that, the main thing, as usual with the 80-20 rule, is having the reference track in here. So we have the Fisher song Waiting for Tonight in here, and I've turned it off and set it so when I flick the S key, I can hear that song versus our song. And then main thing is to get the volumes right. So have a listen to the vocals. So you can hear, I'm hoping, like getting the volumes is really kind of the main thing. That's going to really get you to that professional level. Because other than that, once the volumes are set, you've picked what you want in there. It's standard channel strip. So this is what I have on all my MIDI and audio channels. First off is we're removing a little bit of the lows, make sure that it's not conflicting with like the kick or the bass or anything. You kind of want to keep that headroom there nice and clean, leaving it so that all of the low ends coming from the bass and the kick. And just shaving off a little bit off the top here. Mostly this is for like an arrangement trick. There's a part of the song where I swelled it up slowly. Other than that, we're just doing a little bit of sidechain. The way I prefer to do sidechain is with like an Ableton Shaper device like this, going to quarter notes and just ducking down the gain. So this way you don't have to like add in a compressor and map it to the kick and all that kind of crap. With these one knob things, you're just dialing it in, using your ears, moving on. That's definitely the way I prefer to go about things. In this instance, we're also doing a little bit of some sends and returns. So a little bit, you can see very lightly dialed in. We're using a bit of a reverb here, Valhalla vintage verb, and a couple different delays, a shorter delay at eighth notes, a longer delay on quarter notes, and then not using any of this, but I usually like to have a modulation like a chorus. The main thing when dialing these in, if you can listen to it, also soloed. It's very subtle, and the trick that I always like to do is when you're dialing this in, say the reverb, what you want to do is bring it in slowly. Once you can hear the reverb, like fairly audibly, dial it back a little bit. And that's kind of the method I use when applying reverb and delay. Nice way to make it so it's subtle, it's tasteful, and it's fitting in the mix nicely. Moving on from that, the next main element is this piano, so let's have a look and listen to it. Listen to the reference. So I went for a little bit of a different style. I think the main thing is you're kind of looking for that like slightly percussive sounding piano bit. I had to obviously change it so that it was fitting in with like the tune that I'm working on here. And for what I was liking, it was more of this held notes. And I usually don't do this, but I actually programmed in all the individual MIDI. I was having a hard time finding any kind of cool sample-based way to do it, so I actually programmed it in. It's mostly I just kind of like listen to this track. ding, 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 ding. It kind of went for a similar kind of vibe with that rhythm, and adjusted it, flicking back and forth between this and the bass line that I wrote to kind of follow along with the chord progression. And then just did some weird little things like to taste, like how some notes are jumping ahead and kind of like that. Just did it by ear. I'm not a music theory person. I can't explain too much about this, but hopefully looking at it helps. In terms of usually once my process though is once like the notes are in, the next thing I go for is the sound design. So I found this upright piano sound, which is part of Ableton, I believe, and then just adjusted it to get rid of some of the reverb, brought back the release a bit, make it a little bit more percussive sounding. Then threw on this like lo-fi sampler thing, probably very subtle. Just adds a little bit of character and vibe to it. And then using EQ8 to get rid of a bunch of the lows, and then I'm shelving out a bit of the highs, which is going to be a more natural way to get rid of some of the highs. And then I'm using the low pass filter to slowly swell it in. It's a bit more of an arrangement technique. Then using this transient shaper, so this is the free kilohertz transient shaper. All I've done is just mapped all the key knobs to a Ableton rack, so you can just one knob things, move quickly through things without getting distracted by the UI and any of that stuff. So I increased the attack, so this is the transient of the hit. It's getting emphasized a little bit more. And then I brought down the sustain a bit to kind of tighten it up so that the rest of the note isn't sustaining or decaying as long. Then we're running into that one knob sidechain, just giving some pumping vibes, and also making it so that the kick hit is coming through a little bit nicer. And then we're using a little bit of saturation, so this is just Ableton Saturator, as you can see here. I just mapped it here. Usually I like it in this configuration because usually when you add in some sidechain, it's going to decrease the volume a bit, and I like to bring it back with saturation, but it's also just generally something good to have here. It's a way to thicken up sounds a bit, make it sound a little bit fuller, maybe a little bit more grittier, not quite distortion, but it's a nice way to add some character as well. So I like to have it there. We're increasing it there. Then we're running it into this one knob width plugin. This is the Polyverse Wider. This is also another free plugin. Again, I just mapped the key, all the key knobs to an Ableton rack, so it's just all there ready to go. And just dialed it in a little bit. This is kind of pushing things to the left and right, making it a bit more stereo, making room for stuff in the middle. And that's a look at that. So it comes in a couple different areas. This is a little bit more arrangement-y, but I want to show you how this looks. So there's a couple different spots. So first, it's in this like chorus, this break. And I do have another vocal track here where I just kind of cut up little bits like this, like that breathing. Sounds so sick. We'll listen to the drop for a bit. That's that one there, but then there's also this. So if we listen to like, it's almost like a bit more of an arrangement trick, but what's cool is to build out the full piano house, full chord progression bit like that. Then what I did was I copied this over and flattened and freezed it so that it was an audio bit. And then that way I was able to create like the little stab bit that comes in here. So let me stop the app and show you. Get a loop. Okay, so let's have a look. So what this is we have a listen to the reference. That little, I kind of heard it as maybe it was like from the Piano House bit in the Waiting for You for Tonight track. I like the idea of reusing bits throughout the song, so there's almost a consistency through the track that like the listener can hear, almost like a theme. So I found a bit where it was like I just chopped it up a little bit, but it was more or less doing a similar rhythm. Dropped it into there. In terms of any processing, added in the shifting grit preset, trying to make it sound a little bit less like just a piano, and then standard channel strips up. So we're removing a bunch of the lows, a little bit of saturation to fill it out, and a little bit of width. And then what I did is I panned it a bit to the right, and then I added an additional element to the left to kind of fill it up. Let's solo it. And then together with the piano. And so what I went for, I think I looked up like Rave Stab or something like that over on Splice. and then found this thing where you can see like that delay trail that it kind of has, or I'll show you right here. What I did is just chopped it up a little bit like that, and then went and kind of played around with it so that at certain points it's kind of echoing out. There's definitely nothing like that in the original tune, but I thought it was cool, so I added it in like that. And then they kind of work together, because if you do listen to the original reference, it doesn't sound like a piano. It sounds maybe a little, some kind of synthesizer or something like that. So I feel like layering it was a cool idea there. And then I also want to show you this next little trick here. So going into the verse here, what I did was I took a bit of the vocal. Let me just show you it actually. And let me bring it back, and I'm going to solo it for you as well. So have a listen. Okay, and then that's what that looks like right there. So the idea is, what I did was I found the vocal, and from the Britney Spears bit here, I took a little chunk of it and exported out, and then added a bunch of reverb to it, and then consolidated that, and then reversed it. So it's like a way to create like a nice little swell. Hopefully that was not too confusing. I can make a separate video on that, but you could also look up like reverse vocal technique or something like that on YouTube, and someone could probably explain it better. That way it goes into. It's a nice way basically to create it so that it like makes it so that when the vocal comes in for the verse like that, for example, it's not as unexpected. It's like leading into it. So have to look at that right there. I think that might more or less be it. I want to see if there's anything else that I can show you that's cool. Okay, then the other thing that I did add was a little bit of a pad. So have a look and listen to this. I solo it for a second. And this isn't really in the original track. This is something that I added to kind of make things a little bit more full and interesting in the break. Because we have listened to maybe there's some kind of pad. But just like a nice way, when you have like drops or breaks like this rather, like that, it could be a nice way to add in a pad so that you can fill out the sound a little bit more, because you're taking away a bunch of elements. So it can be nice to bring in something like that. And listen to this drop, it sounds so sick. I love that, it's so freaking cool. But yeah, other than that, quick little other things I want to show you real quick is like during the break, snatching some of like these other bits to use as like this I took like that little stabby thing, and it's just like something subtle, repeating, adding some kind of vibe to the breaks a little bit. And then another thing too is if you listen to the piano, it's cut up, so then instead of the full chord progression, it's like chopped up a little bit. And then same thing, grab that vocal. So just like little ways that you can make like the build sound really interesting, because that's definitely what Fisher did, or whoever made the song. Made it here. You can hear like they chop everything up really cool in a way, like right here. And everything kind of gets chopped up as a really cool way to make like a really cool build up into the final drop. But yeah, I think that's a pretty good look at this one. If you want to take a bigger, deeper dive into this, definitely check out the project files for it. And you can have a look at every little thing that has been done here. So what we'll do next is we'll do an overview of the 80-20 rule when it comes to creating synths and vocals like this, so you can kind of take note of the 3 or 4 key things you're going to want to think about and work towards when you're building out tracks like this. Before we jump into that, I also want to mention that this video is sponsored by our good friends over at Rocket Powered Sound. They hooked up the drums here, so the solid ass kick that you're hearing is 2 combinations of kicks from their Ultimate Sample Pack, which is a collection of over 1,000 really iconic and usable drum samples. Super useful, especially if you watch the portion of this where we're going over the drums. That similar sound feature, having a solid sample library is really important when you're using kind of AI to replace stuff and all that kind of interesting stuff where music production is going. But anyways, that was a ramble. Main thing is to say thank you to them for sponsoring it, and you can also grab that Ultimate Sample Pack for 30% off by using the code ULTIMATEBESTFRIENDS. There's links and the code on the screen right now, and there's also links and everything like that in the description. But with that said, yeah, thanks to Rocket Powered Sound, and let's jump into the 80-20 rule for this one. Hi, my friend, Matt from Best Friends Club here. And if you've been paying attention to this super long video, then you've probably figured out what the 80-20 rule is when it comes to building out your songs. The goal here is to get 80% of the result with only 20% of the time, energy, and effort. And because the first key to the 80-20 rule here is to use a reference track, we're making sure that we're very easily hitting 80% of a high quality, professionally made song. In particular, we use that reference track to make sure that we're picking the right notes, sounds, and volumes as we're building out our song. The second key of the 80-20 rule here is to mix as you go in an extremely streamlined way by only focusing on the volume of each track, as well as using a simple repeatable channel strip for each track that we're adding to our songs. The third and final key is to repurpose your old project files and have a suite of powerful templates, Ableton racks, and one-knob effects that you've personalized and curated over time. If you'd like to get a head start by downloading all the racks, templates, and all the files that you've seen me use in the Ableton project file for this video, or if you'd just like to take a closer look at any of the techniques or tracks you saw me work on in this video at your own pace, you can find a link to this video's project files on screen now and at the second link that's in the YouTube description. I'm recreating a different song from the Beatport top charts every single week and making the project files available to anyone who wants them. You'll also get access to a private Discord where you can ask me and the community questions, as well as share tracks for feedback. If you or your music are not quite ready for a shot in the arm like that, I've also made you a completely free bundle of templates, samples, and special bonuses that have helped me figure out how to completely finish one new song each and every single week. And you can grab that free Ultimate Song Finishing Toolkit by visiting the first link that's in the YouTube description here. However, if you just feel like staying on YouTube for now, that's totally fine. Save that link for later. And check out this playlist filled with videos just like the one you just watched, where I completely create songs inspired by tracks found in the Beatport top charts. Or if you really want to take what you've learned in this video to the next level, make sure you check out this video right here.